Hi, everybody. Welcome to TAM Integration's Q&A Circles community meetings. I'm really glad you're here. It is Thursday, January 12th, 2023. So happy New Year. I am really happy to be able to introduce a guy who is becoming my friend over time. It's been great to talk to you and get to know you. Josh Peck runs sound meditation center called the Dojo Upstate in upstate New York. He's a classically trained musician and multi-instrumentalist and has spent the past 16 years in New York City as a composer and music producer for film and television, exploring sound as a vehicle for transformation through mindfulness, meditation, and immersive storytelling. Josh, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Daniel. And thanks for everybody to show up and be curious. I love riffing about sound and non-ordinary states, and yeah, pleasure to be with everybody.
Yeah. So how did you did your journey move through the more commercial world to this more esoteric, or were you always a little bit esoteric and you were just using film production as a way to pay the bills?
It's a great question. I definitely think there was always a part of me from an early age that understood innately how sound could really move states of consciousness, could be my paintbrush, my my solace. And came to New York City, was slinging drinks on the Upper West Side, and wanted to be an audio engineer, mixing records, and ended up sleeping on couches to apprentice with some of the largest recording studios and cut my teeth in a lot of the technical areas of sound at first. Fell into composing and working with writing music for film and television and moving picture. And it was through that world in 2008 that I ended up in the jungle as a sound recordist, holding a mic, working on a documentary about plant medicine. And my origin story, really, I come to this work really from a place of I wasn't so experimental in college, and so I was really cautious about learning about this world, and found myself on the other side of the lens for a while, really observing how space was held, what some of the mechanics were behind it, and over time really fell into coming back to the way I worked with sound initially and loved being engaged in that world, which is not selling car commercials or products or trying to induce or coerce kind of emotional states, but more to create experiential, immersive experiences that are more of an invitation to create tapestries of elements, much more in the format of ambient, long form, textural sounds, not so lyrical, not so melodic, things that would speak to consciousness on a different level, maybe even more of an immediate way, a way of indicating processes without specific story. And so that's where I found myself on that kind of journey for the last decade, is really leaning into creating immersive experiences. Some of it's taken me on a road to working with apps for wellness, museum installations, and supporting the psychedelic space as well with preparation and integration.
Right. So when you were in the jungle, was that, am I correct in assuming that was like your first ayahuasca journey or something like that?
It was, except I was there as crew. And so it was not, in one of the truest ways, I feel like that world found me or reached out to me, like so many of us.
Right.
And had the opportunity to sit along with the rest of the crew at some point through a few versions of different sessions.
So it was just like a job perk.
It was a total job perk.
It
Yeah.
was just a perk of the job. Good, good. It's good when there are bonuses like that.
Yeah.
And how did that, like, was there a particularly profound audio experience in those jungle sits, those first sits? Did it change the way you thought about sound?
I think I saw a lot of the mechanics, particularly in that lineage, and a lot of the shamanism and that philosophy
Mhm.
really emphasizes Ikaros and using the voice to bring the plant spirit, to invoke those different states of awarenesses and connecting, engaging with the medicines. Um, it was on that project that I really connected with a very dear friend and mentor who his name is Alexandre Tenus. And for those who are curious, you can see his work at soundmeditation.com. And he really took me under his wing and shared with me this world of working with sound to support these expanded states, and really merging the esoteric, the Eastern philosophical, and the Western scientific worlds. And in the last few years, my wife Eliza, who is also a partner here at the dojo upstate, we've both been deepening our practice, enrolled in a training for psychedelic assisted therapy, and through there expanding the network and connections. So that's sort of the evolution of moving from composer to supporting these kinds of spaces.
Right. Okay. And so you say that you use these sound meditations as preparatory practice. And so let's say I'm going to go down to the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want to do some prep work, right? And you're like, okay, well, like come over to the dojo. And so will you tell me what my experience would be? You know, I see some gongs. I assume I'm going to get gonged, but will you tell me like what would happen to me and why that would be beneficial?
Yeah, yeah. I start with um, really narrowing in on the labeling of the modality of the format, referring to
Mhm.
it as a sound meditation, maybe even a sound journey, and really clarifying why there's a difference between sound healing or uh, sound healing or what's the other one? Sound bath. And I
Mhm.
think language really creates reality, and the word bath in itself creates this sense of a passive experience. You're awash in wonderful, soothing sounds, much like a massage. In many ways, that's what this work can do. It can open up those spaces, and there's so many different flavors and versions of this offering. People that use these same instruments. Um, Similarly, sound healing, I think, can be a little bit of a misdirect in that it emphasizes or suggests that it's either the sound that's healing, one that the participant is broken and needs fixing or healing, um, and I really think that the what's happening in these experiences is less about something exterior shifting that inner landscape, and more about the combination of engaging with the content.
If I can interrupt real quick, have you
Please.
read Naomi Remen's In Service to Life?
No, not yet. I'm going to write that down though. Yeah.
Well, it's just a really profound article. And she says, when we talk about healing, what we're saying is that somebody's broken and we have the expertise to fix them,
Right.
you know, or they're sick and we can fix them and it creates a separation. Or if we are, even if we're maybe teaching them, then like we know something they don't. Um, but if we serve them, like the holiness, like the sacredness in me is like in service, is communing with with the sacredness in you, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
we
I love
serve
that.
we don't serve life because it's broken. We serve it because it's holy. And I just, you know, that your awareness to kind of that idea, um, I liked.
Mm-hmm.
Nice that you brought that through.
Well, and to really tie it into the psychedelic movement, I feel like all of these things are really tools. And
Mhm.
on a lot of the explosion of new approaches, I see a lot of this impulse for a prescriptive response. What do I do to fix this? What treats alcoholism? What treats addiction, PTSD? What sound do you want to play to make it happy? How can, especially with coming from the branding world and working for years in advertising, we want, of course, people to leave feeling happy and joyful. And as I'm sure everybody here recognizes, so often the deepest moments for potential transformation, which can lead to healing, are on our edges, are in the harder material, sometimes the more uncomfortable things. So sounds and music that can be challenging can often be a critical piece to that, to finding that movement within, to reaching catharsis, to experiencing, allowing the sounds of sadness or nostalgia to really indulge in grief, to create the space that's safe and contained and defined, where we
Mm.
can experience these things that have been compartmentalized and then percolate later in unhealthy ways and come out in different kinds of symptoms.
Right.
So to answer the question of what is the experience like when you come here? How is the preparation work in support of these experiences? I think it's about gaining more familiarity with the inner landscape and understanding how to use the technology, how to use mushrooms, how one might use other compounds or supplements, how one might use sound, how one can use the breath to get to these states. I think, and not to be crude with language, but in many ways, these are just devices, excuses, particularly in group work, I think, to the real medicine is the willingness to be vulnerable in a group and to be seen. And then that to me opens the invitation for a mystical experience where for some reason, somehow that allowance leads to a movement, leads to a shift, the opportunity for a new perspective. And sound is a way of getting out of, the sound is a vehicle that allows someone in my position to get out of the way. It's not about dogma or story or personality. I always tell some participants or students that if you can say it better through an instrument than with words, particularly in a, that's always the better way. And that's just about ethos, how one might approach the instrument. If you play it loudly or aggressively or very intimately and softly, can have a whole different spectrum of emotion.
I agree. I was always marveled, and forgive my particular dorkiness here, but I always marveled how Jerry Garcia was able to sing a song with words
Mm.
and then tell you the same thing with the guitar right after,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
in a way that was almost just like more human and poignant and heartfelt.
Well, what's so, to share more about why I find sound to be such a helpful tool in all of these spaces is that it um, allows each person to have a very intimate, deeply personal experience. Um, how did you know to play the gong at this moment in my experience that just blew me open and expanded? And someone sitting right next to them in that same experience might have felt the gravity and the darkness or sort of a weight to go in. So the reality is that um, there are some generalizations, and this has actually been studied, that across cultures and different um, demographics, there are generally happy collection of notes and sounds and scales that invoke a specific quality of
Right.
beings, like in Arabic music, makabs, or Indian classical music. And there are specific tones and scales, collections of notes, ratios, relationships that might induce a specific kind of nostalgia or yearning.
There was
But
a
within that, there's a very personal experience that might mean something very different to someone.
right. I believe there was a musical comedian who would say D minor, the saddest of all chords.
Yes. What is it? I know the reference. It's Jack Black or
It was either Jack Black or that British guy with the wild hair that did the Canvas Bag song,
yeah, that's a good.
or somebody else. But what it also makes me think of is, when those kinds of things happen, and again, not to just be, throwing Grateful Dead references at everything, the music plays the band.
Mm,
So, if there's a field of sound, and not to get like too psychedelically esoteric, to suggest that even the musician is just having his strings pulled by the cosmic sound. It's like, did you know you were going to hit the gong at that moment? Or was that what was in the field and you were compelled?
mhm.
Is the kind of the one, if it's a meditation, right? And when we meditate, we sort of tune into the oneness, the vibratory, the universal consciousness, if you will, that we have this, that you're just a part of. You just kind of think you're playing, but the
Yeah.
music is just happening, and you happen to be the character holding the mallet while it's striking the gong.
Well, I think it's a nice way of democratizing an experience too. You're really communing with source. There's not a performer and there's not an audience. It becomes a shared experience in the truest form.
Mhm.
When especially when I'm doing it correctly, or it feels in flow. It feels like I'm a kid in front of a new instrument discovering a new thing together with people, and it opens up a moment of inspiration or curiosity. Or it's I think when things get stale or rote, or um, one approaches any of this kind of work as just without the passion, with just
Mhm.
trying to scale and to make money, that you lose that magic spark of communing. And I think a lot of musicians will speak to that. Certainly the Grateful Dead were playing really for the community, I think more so than for just themselves. And so I
Yeah, I
like to
mean,
bring
they
that to
grew up as like a community house band.
yeah.
Right? They didn't start playing, 20, 30, 50,000 person arenas. They started playing acid tests,
Hmm.
which were kind of like a proto Burning Man.
Hmm.
They just had, it's, as somebody said to me once, they just happened to be the guys who could hold the instruments the best on all that acid. And so what is the difference? So preparing by using sound is that you say you're preparing by starting to learn how to navigate your inner landscape and to sort of open to experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think meditation can be such a trigger for people. It was for me, certainly. I came back from the experience with ayahuasca, wanting to be in that space more frequently and to visit that without the um, supplements or the medicine. And so I studied transcendental meditation,
Hmm.
which was helpful for a while, and it has a very specific system and framework that can be helpful. It's just the same as Vedic meditation, mantra based, and quickly discovered how instruments made that same space much more accessible. And so to answer your question, I think it's the instruments make that inner realm much more available than I have found that I can go with just breath or silence or candle gazing or other kinds of meditation. I think there's a reason that music is the most popular art form. It's because it's so um, understandable, so universal as a language, and in this way um, creates a really strong gravity to go inward. The minute you strike a singing bowl, it won't really translate over Zoom, but without fail, when I do this in person, people again you drop the language, the story, the intellectualizing, and it just becomes a gnostic experiential knowledge where it's knowledge of the heart. You immediately feel that invitation to go in, or that curiosity.
Right.
So it's sort of like a pedestal where you can place your awareness, and you might still have all the noise and the monkey mind and the ticker tape of, oh, I got to email this person, I got to, work out this relationship with my friend. But if you then come back to the listening, Paulina Oliveros was sort of the first pioneer of the term deep listening as a means to explore that inner landscape. And I think sound can be thought of as this framework, as, again, just a way of listening, not just to the notes, to the music or the melody or the song or the lyrics, but to the kinds of emotions that are percolating within, what's coming up when you're hearing that. And that ties back to the meditative part, to engaging with the content. You're not just a wash and a bath. You're an observer. You're noticing. You're playing with awareness, being aware of being aware.
Yeah, that's really, really nice. You're making me think of how fun it is to, you're talking about moving your attention with a lot of precision to listening, right? Because mostly it's just wrapped up in repetitive thought. I gotta say, one of my favorite things is to try and notice when there's no more sound coming out of the singing bowl, right? Because it gets quieter and it gets quieter and it gets quieter, and how do you know? Like, where is that really liminal moment almost?
Oh, Daniel, I'm so glad you are this person because to me, it's that end envelope of like where the qualities of silence, how deep. And honestly, this room was constructed with that intention. This is a circular room with diffusion and absorption in the walls and 22 speakers in the wall and what we call the oculus up here, and then 4 in the ceiling.
Mhm.
And the best part about the room is I can shut the door when people come in, not play a damn thing. And it's the quality of silence that's so profound, and the way that you can use instruments to explore that space of how long is that sustain of a singing bowl? What draws it out? It's still there. You're creating, music is all about tension and release, and the yin and the yang. And again, I feel like these are this builds upon the tools for psychonauting, exploring that inner landscape, understanding the different levers within human consciousness and process, the
Mhm.
value of suffering, the leaning into one moment, but trusting that the sound can move you through the chapters. And so not being
Right.
stuck in loops, but having a thread.
And of course, I mean, of course, I'm saying, like, everybody's friends do this, but you know, having some singing bowls and getting a little high, and then putting them on different parts of our bodies and ringing them, and having these good hearted discussions or arguments about like which chakra this bowl is for. No, this one is for the belly. No, man, it's for the third eye. No, it's for the heart. I like this for the heart too. Yeah. And just really allowing, there have been times when I've been in, a little bit stuck in my head, and ringing a bowl on my sternum knocked it out, knocked out the bad trip right out right out of my mind. And that can be really handy. That can be really beautiful because, whereas I know that there are some thoughts that lead me to things that I need to work out, sometimes I just have like old stuff I need to, so sometimes it's better to just change the direction.
What do you think it is about the bowl on the body that allows you to shift, that allows you to not get, to knock something out?
Um, well, I think so. Before I even knew the word somatic, my coaching has a lot of, I've done a lot of somatic coaching training. But before I even knew what that word was, I was a body worker and a yoga teacher.
Mhm.
And so I sort of trained in and worked with people in using their body as a relationally, right? To work, to relate to experience, to relate to the world, and to know their world through their body. And so I experience the world through my body. And quite often when I'm having, for example, I mean, when I'm mad, I'm mad. When I'm sad, I'm sad. But there are times when I will notice an emotion in my body. I'll notice frustration or disappointment or some kind of subtle emotion as a sensation first. There'll be like this little twist in my heart or something, or a little something in the pit of my stomach. And then I'll be like, oh, what's that? Be like, oh, I'm nervous. It's like, oh, I'm disappointed. And so I just think that my system, and probably many people's systems, I can't say universally, um, communicates to us through nerve impulses, right, which are observable as sensation. And that when we are living in a complicated world where things are imperfect and people are imperfect and there's countless disappointments and heartbreaks and frustrations all day long for years, um, that those impulses get confused and frustrated and disappointed, and they don't fire exactly the most efficiently all the time. And so they're just stuck sometimes,
Mhm.
right? And that turns into tension, and maybe, depending on how you believe in prana and chi, you've got stuck prana and chi in there. And there's something about like some kind of vibrating seven metal vessel that just can help knock it loose.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think I fully agree. And I agree that to me, it's a recognition. There's an internal knowing, a realignment, a rejuvenation, a reconnecting, which I think is also a really good way to think about the journeys in expanded states, whether it's sound, breath, psychedelics, compounds, supplements, body work. Um, it's all about that experiential wisdom, that knowledge that, the body is probably the most wise in that realm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So, how does a preparation sound meditation differ from sound meditation for integration?
Hmm. That's such a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with the kinds of intentions, the mindset with which you enter,
Hmm.
um, and creating a person-centered sound experience, knowing a little bit about um, what their cultural background is, what kind of music, if I do play a track on the system, um, might feel familiar or might feel foreign or might invoke a sense of yeah, a different immersion and kind of a different flavor.
Hmm.
And I think setting an integration session is more about um, allowing spaces for a settling, inviting um, moments more for contemplation, for unfolding, for opening, for processing, for percolation.
Hmm.
At the beginning, it's maybe more on the front end for preparation. It's more um, maybe exploratory. Why don't we try this hue? Why don't we try this color here? And I think in general, following journeys as a way of integrating experiences, it's much um, more helpful to work with the down regulating kinds of sounds and emotions. Someone's coming right off of a journey, it wouldn't really feel aligned for me to start doing a really percussive, rhythmic, invoked kind of thing. And with holotropic breath work, there is sort of a very scripted evolution of sounds, and up front in that journey they often work with, you know, very rhythmic, pulsing kind of sounds, a lot of tribal kind of emotions and feelings and sounds to create this induced sense of movement going through a portal. And so in that way, I think the integrative versions of sound would be much more gentler. Maybe it's more singing bowls, chimes, things that maybe sound more introspective instead of rhythmic or movement based. But it's also more about the participant than really playing things. I think, again, there's this trap with sound of like, what do you play to do this, the prescriptive approach. And um,
the allopathic approach.
yeah. So I think it's in many regards, you know, what I think might be appropriate might be helpful on both realms for people in both directions, as a way to go in, to prepare, to explore that world, and as also a way to anchor and to integrate, to hone in on insights, takeaways. In general, I find it's really helpful for integration, because it creates this bridge. It creates a bridge from our sort of 3D world to the 5D by using this language that's universal, and it's more of a vehicle, more of a tapestry than anything specific. Right. And I think there's a really interesting way of looking at the phenomenology of experience, using these Greek terms, ethos, this idea of suggestion, emotion. And that's, I think, what sound gets us close to the ethos. There is this the ambiance or the feel of a sound, the power of a sound. And from ethos, we go to pathos, the leaning in, the naming, the calling it. Oh, that is a nostalgic sound, or that is D minor, the saddest chord of them all, scale of them all. That's calling it something. And then from pathos, you have mythos, story. Because it's this, I am this way. You create a narrative. And I think a lot of these experiences, it's about unpacking that, coming in with all our stories. I was an abused child, or I'm going through a divorce, or I'm a victim. Being so invested in the story because of conditioning, claiming victimhood, recognition, awareness, pathos, and then going just into the emotions, the feeling, without the script, without the story, without the meaning. This is just sadness. This is just my body wailing without, or crying without any kind of story behind it, that allows us to connect to logos, the fundamentally unknowable source, the primordial Aum, oneness, God, whatever really cosmology feels aligned. It's this sense of returning home that I think sound can help that process, moving from myth, from conditioning, narrative to ethos. And for me, the mystical part of all of these experiences that I don't know how to explain is, for some reason, when we're in the emotions, when we're in the feels, and we just allow that can open up movement, that can lead to healing can happen in that space.
Yeah, I the word that is coming to me as you are throwing all of this Latin at me.
Kai Coke, huius.
Yeah, Latin's not my spiritual language. You know, I'm more likely, you know, to fumble up with some Sanskrit. But just the idea of immediacy, right? You know, we have this immediacy of experience that is often difficult or painful, and so we run away from it, right? Either it's through, you know, drinking or food or sex or what have you, or overthinking, right? Going into that, like the story actually, in my experience, acts as a buffer from the immediacy of the experience.
Mm,
And, one of the things that I love about music and is fairly unique to it as an art form is that it's immediate and it's moment to moment.
mhm,
It's like nobody's grooving, on the last four beats. You're grooving on this four
mm.
beats, you know. It's just
That's
it's all you've got.
such a great point, and so instrumental to, I think, why sound, as we began the conversation, is used, or I like to use it as a way of learning the levers and learning that inner landscape, is because there's no thing more well equipped to help you experience presence.
Mhm.
Sound is really measured in hertz, it's frequency over time. So you're measuring a momentary
Right.
space.
And so when Bear, Bear? Owsley
Bear.
Stanley?
No, if I say
Owsley Stanley was the sound engineer for the Grateful Dead and also funded them because he was a very prolific acid cook.
oh yeah,
And he was very tuned into sound, and he built um, some of their equipment by hand. He had a team, and he would import special woods and
right.
things like
Yeah.
that to create these stereo cabinets. Because before he came along, you had kind of two choices with amplified music. It could either be loud or it could be clear, and
Mhm,
he wanted both.
mhm,
He called his recordings, he recorded like many, many shows, and also other bands that would come through, the Fillmore or whatnot. If he amplified it, he would record it, and he called them his sonic journals. And he really felt like he was capturing the atmosphere of the moment.
mhm.
And on that note, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the capturing of experience and the use of the music that you listen to in your journey as a way to sort of get back to those peak experiences for your integration process.
Mm.
Is that something you work with at all?
Yeah, do you mean recorded versus acoustic?
Yeah, I mean, this is generally lends itself more towards recorded. Like let's say you're listening to some sad piano or some glorious chanting or tribal music, and then you get to listen to it the next week, and it brings you back to that moment.
Right.
Like this phenomenon needs its own name.
Absolutely. And I'd say olfactory stimuli like smells and scents are also so transportive. There's nothing like it. And yeah, a song will come on the radio from the 90s or something. It'll just immediately place you in the back seat of a car the first time you heard it on the cassette or something. And
Hmm.
um, I love sometimes I'll play, Arabic music or Indian classical or different tracks on the system that are spatialized, and people who will come back for an experience. I might play the same song, and it does weave a thread through kind of the journeys and the experiences with sound, which can be helpful. And I think often, it happens in dreams. You wake up and you want to remember, um, write some of the notes down. And I think with a lot of these things, it's always in you, but it's also easy to forget immediately. And sound, in a lot of ways, just like smell, can re-trigger, reignite that memory, reignite that process or that self-knowing.
Cool. Oh, we're starting. This is good. We're right on schedule. We just got our first question from the audience, and um, I'd like to welcome you all, if this is okay with you, Josh.
Yeah,
People are welcome to jump in with questions and either use their voice or type them in. But
love
I'll
to.
read I'll read what Blaine said is, what's your thoughts on sound in a journey minus language? I prefer wordless sound for my journeys. Much
Yeah,
kindness.
I'd love to hear your response to Daniel. I'm such a proponent of I mean, I love the poll from everybody, to be honest, but Without doubt, I think if there are going to be lyrics in any music or playlist or sound that's used in a journey, it should certainly be not in a native tongue. And I think that's part of making an experience a person-centered uh, journey, is knowing, oh, this person's of, speak Spanish. So maybe some English wouldn't be the worst thing. But generally, I think it really activates a different part of the brain when you're listening to even just melody, but also melody with words. It invites such a different um, kind of attention. And I don't think there's a better than or worse than or what's best. I think I used to be way more of a purist, but I've learned through this stuff that there is no one truth. That's what's so great about all of this, is that everybody's truth is valid. Some people really love the Grateful Dead. Some people really don't love it. Don't jam on it.
Nobody's perfect, I guess.
But I think in general, I think it's always great to work with ambient stuff. And also, I would say, in addition to non-lyrical works, acoustic music, but even acoustic music that's rich with overtone content. That is to say, things like medals, bowls, non-fretted instruments, even sort of West African, the Nawa they have like resonators on the end of their instruments, which accentuate some of the overtones and the frequencies that I think are sort of like the magical aurora borealis, the sprinkles, the glitter that actually speaks to the subconscious. I think there's something really related to, it's a much longer conversation, a little more academic, but overtone rich music is really, really powerful in moving states of consciousness, not just non-lyrical.
There's that guy Prana. Do you know that band Prana?
I mean, I know Prana, but I don't know the band. Yeah.
There's a band, they would sometimes tour with like Krishna Das, and they're overtone singers out of New York.
Oh, is this? Oh, yeah, David Hicks, and yeah, yeah. That's exactly the kind of music and content that's amazing. I think David, and he's done some performances here in New York with them.
Yeah.
Uh,
So as far as like music that I like, it depends on the molecule for
mm,
me.
that's very true.
So cannabis, like everything sounds good.
Mhm.
So that's nice,
Mm,
right? It's real, I'm real easy going with cannabis. It could be, anything from, yeah, anything. Um, Mushrooms, I like it like the sparser the better. I
mhm,
probably want like not a lot of lyrics, or just like a song, that has, there's just like life is beautiful, and then it goes back into silence. It's like, but I can also, with mushrooms, like I can be really content with silence. Or there have been times when I put together playlists, on like a solo mushroom journey. I put together a playlist, and then it's just like, this is too much. And I reach over and, go to YouTube and find like 4 hours of Gayatri mantra, and
mhm,
like put on the Gayatri mantra and just let it ride. And it's just in the background. Um, Ketamine, I like really crispy, well produced electronic music. Like the
mhm,
quality of production seems to matter a lot there. I've listened to some ketamine playlists where it was like really, really crispy stuff, and then something that wasn't as well produced, and it was like really jarring. So
mhm,
I try to just like have a consistent production value for
mhm,
ketamine. And I do like kind of a variety of, most, instrumental, but kind of a variety of tempos to sort of push the journey along in different ways. And I kind of grew up, as you might have guessed, listening to kind of like good old fashioned psychedelic rock and roll on LSD.
mhm,
And so I still like good old fashioned rock and roll on LSD, like Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, Funkadelic, Jimi Hendrix, like that still really like hits a sweet spot. So, and then, yeah, Icarus on ayahuasca.
mhm.
those guys knew what they were doing. Have fun at Women's Circle, Gene, if you're still here. I don't know if you left, but any other questions or thoughts from folks? Brian, can I just call on you to throw your 2 cents in? No? All right, what do you have to say for yourself, Brian? No? Okay. Well, cool.
I
Do
have
you
a I have a I have a audience question. I would love if anybody feels moved, or like the first, maybe it's a Spotify link or a YouTube link, the first piece of music that comes to mind. Maybe it's one of the first things you really felt helpful in the journey, or a go-to track when you're blue or happy. But I always find a share, again, it kind of can say so much without language, and it'd be fun to start seeing some links in the chat that maybe, I don't know, maybe Daniel can post later. If anybody has anything that immediately stands out, wants to share, I'd love to hear, just to hear what you guys are listening to.
Oh, what people are listening to in their journeys these days?
Yeah, or like a go-to track, something they like, or maybe it's on one of your favorite playlists, or something you would start a playlist with. Oh, I gotta play this track that's that singer, or John Hopkins, or something that's a go-to.
And I'll let these folks warm up. One of my favorite opening tracks on like a psilocybin playlist. It hasn't offended me or bothered me yet. There's a guy named Pedro Vidar. Pedro grew up in the Mazatec Mountains. Like he grew up eating mushrooms like in Oaxaca, in like the same area as Maria Sabina, and just like communing with like the spirit of the mountain and the spirit of thunder. And he's a really powerful medicine musician. And he has a song called Cuatros Elementos. And it's just, I'm sure we all know the old rainbow song is earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. I believe that old prayer. And he they sing it in Spanish. And it really brings me in, like it sort of orients. It's a really good orientation. Oh, but we're getting some good links.
No, I'm opening these little links. It's so great. This is such a, should start a playlist share.
Okay, we've got an Om Namah Shivaya by Krishna Das. Solid.
Yeah, people, here we go. This is great.
What do we have by Brian is throwing in Tash Sultana? No, just a song called Trip 5 by Heavy Mellow. That's rad. Great for ketamine or going for a walk. Nice. But you can't do both. Pick one. All right, so I guess Brian, can I ask you to collect all of these or make a playlist so we can put these in like the show notes for this YouTube video? Already on it. Great.
Awesome.
And I guess I will then find Joe. Really, really sweet guy. Here comes the sun. Andy, you are Marin Mike. That is Marin Mike's favorite song is Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles.
Thanks, man. Didn't want to disappoint.
There's Los Cuatro Elementos.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
All right, great stuff. Does anybody else have any other questions for Josh?
Just thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. Thanks for being here.
Josh, is there anything else you feel like you want people to know?
Trust yourself. Don't always be discerning.
Brad, and then how do people find you?
You can go to thedojoupstate.com, or you can email me at josh@thedojoupstate.com, and or just reach out to Daniel and he'll find me.
I mean, I'll just tell them those two things.
Yeah, and I'd also like to do a shout out to my wonderful wife and partner, who is I think it's so helpful to have in that kind of balance doing this kind of work. And she is tending to our little 2-year-old, or who's actually asleep now, but she is equally part of the Dojo Upstate and co-creating these experiences, and brings such a beautiful flavor to these experiences for anybody who's ever interested in visiting.
Yeah, I want our kids to like play singing bowls together.
Oh, let's do it.
Remind me how far away you are from Great Barrington?
Probably, I don't know. I'm kind of near Storm King Arts Center, so maybe a couple hours, not too far. What's the best Hertz for any journey? That's such a good loaded question. I am in the camp of believing that it's not about a magical frequency that unlocks you, but about you tuning to some sort of frequency yourself to unlock an awareness. I know there's like hours and hours of online debates about 432, 440, and equal tempered, non-equal tempered. And I think, again, intuition, trust yourself, what feels right. Some people swear by microdosing. Some people feel like it's not where it's at. I think the same is kind of true for being too prescriptive and exact with Hertz.
Right. And is that the stuff like the solfeggio frequencies? Are that's the Hertz stuff, or is that something different?
It's measured in Hertz, and I think that I might be speaking out of line, but I believe that's based off of integers of frequencies of harmonics.
Right. I do like those.
Yeah. No, I think more needs to be understood. I'm going to take the middle road on if there's a magic frequency or a heart frequency or a frequency of love. I think that someone also mentioned earlier before the music playlists that the intention, well, who said that? I feel like intention behind the journey is massive, Brian. I think that's way more potent than any kind of tone or frequency. It's what you bring.
Yeah. If you don't like it, change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I personally have no patience for sad piano.
Even in D minor?
I don't want any sad piano in my journeys.
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm a Cancer. I know how to cry if I have to. It's not a big deal. I can feel sad. I don't need to listen to overly maudlin piano.
No Niels Fromm?
I don't know Niels Fromm.
Oh, Niels Fromm might be one of my ads if I were to throw a link on. Niels Fromm, incredible for journey music.
Is he like the best sad piano musician?
He mixes it up. He does some electroacoustic stuff too, and incredible. He's playing on 420 here in New York. Highly recommend catching a live show. He's got like 3 different pianos and a whole wall of synths, and it's ambient, electronic, groovy, but deeply mellow too.
Maybe we'll come down. The kid has been wanting to go to is playing in the city?
Playing in the city, yeah. I think in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, the kid has been asking to visit New York. It's interesting. They get to be 3 years old and they want to do stuff. They want to do expensive things all of a sudden.
Yeah, ours is 2, so I'm 1 year away from that. I'm gonna track you and get your best advice, best practices.
Snuggle them,
Yeah,
tell them no, and hug them when they're upset about it. That's all I know how to do. Be like, it's okay to be sad. I'm gonna hug you. I'm here for you. The answer is no. That's all I got. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Josh, for being here. And I don't know, like and subscribe, I guess. Come to more circles. You can donate if you want. But it's just good to have you here. We do have a meditation intensive starting in February. It's a 4-week integration, psychedelic meditation, psychedelic integration intensive. We've taken hundreds of people through it and they seem to really like it. So it'd be good to have you aboard. And yeah, I think that's a wrap. Be well, everybody.
thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Josh.